Darling Harbour has seemingly always wanted to be known as the entertainment capital of Sydney. Over that way we have the hat-trick of Merlin attractions. Behind me we have the brand new gargantuan International Convention Centre. Over there we also have the construction on our brand new IMAX theatre. However, if I was standing in this exact spot 20 years ago, I'd be standing in the middle of a lake, and in front of me would have been Sega World Sydney. Yes, here in Australia we did call it Sega World, even though our video game openings still sounded like this. Sega! Inside the distinctively 90s building was rides, shows, a giant arcade, and even a roller coaster. Unfortunately, the park would struggle to stay open from the beginning, failing to even see 5 years of operation. For Review Time, I'm Luke, and let's take a look at Sydney's lost video game theme park, Sega World Sydney. In the 1990s, Sega and Nintendo were duking it out to see who would become the undisputed king of the video game console market. In Nintendo's corner was the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, and in Sega's corner was the Sega Mega Drive, or the Sega Genesis for our American friends. One man riding high off the success of Sega in Australia was Kevin Burmeister, founder of Aussiesoft, who initially started out in the 1980s as a multi-platform entertainment software distributor, before seeing massive success in 1987 when they began representing Sega Enterprises Japan in Australia and New Zealand. Within 3 years, Aussiesoft was Australia's largest international software distributor, and soon after, both companies would come together to form Sega Aussiesoft Proprietary Limited. With continued success off the back of this new partnership, Burmeister began looking for a new direction to take Sega in, and he found it when his new company Jack Fun would win the 99-year lease over a 1.5 hectare block of land right in the heart of Sydney, with the promise of turning it into an entertainment facility. Through joint funding from Jack Fun, Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority and Sega themselves, Burmeister raked together a total of $80 million and spent the next 3 years turning the plot of land into a unique indoor video game theme park. Sega weren't newcomers when it came to operating amusement parks. They had already opened the Joypolis Park in Yokohama, Japan in 1994, and this park served as a form of blueprint for the Sega World project. Though offered the name Joypolis for their new Sydney park, Jack Fun wanted a name that showed the bigger size and scale of their venture. They wanted their name to evoke that of a place which revolved entirely around Sega and their video games, and thus decided on the name Sega World as a more fitting title. Sega World Sydney officially opened its doors in March of 1997 to significant press, with them referring to it as the interactive version of Disneyland in the heart of Australia. Partnered with an advertising campaign featuring popular Australian television personality Ernie Dingo, the park opened to strong reviews from guests, who decided to step foot inside the big red building topped with a glass cone, which housed one of the world's largest indoor theme parks. The park itself was separated into 3 distinct areas, themed to a moment of time, ingeniously called Past, Present, and Future. To get to each of these themed areas, you would need to travel through the time tunnels, brightly lit neon corridors which looked very similar to the Rainbow Corridor over at Epcot's Imagination Pavilion. Each land was home to its own thematically appropriate attractions. The Past section contained 2 of the park's most noteworthy and popular rides. First was the Rail Chase roller coaster, themed to the shoot-'em-up arcade game of the same name. The ride was an indoor minecart coaster built by Masago Industrial, which featured elaborate theming throughout and was heralded at the time as Sydney's only indoor coaster. The other major attraction in the Past area was Ghost Hunters, an interactive dark ride shooter attraction in which you travel through an immersively themed haunted house, shooting at CGI ghosts which were projected onto a Perspex windshield on your vehicle, forming an augmented reality illusion. Both of these attractions were guest favorites, really delivering on the park's promise of interactivity. Heading back towards the present section, you found the park's merchandise and food offerings, as well as another attraction with Magic Motion 4D, which was a 4D cinema like a commonplace now, but it was truly a revolutionary addition for Sydney back in the late 1990s. The final of the 3 areas was the future, and contained 3 more innovative attractions, including Mad Bazooka, a mix between bumper cars and tanks which rolled around an arena collecting balls in order to fire them at targets mounted onto other cars. Also contained in this area was Aqua Nova, a 3D motion simulator which took you on a submarine voyage to an underwater city, where you were attacked by a giant sea monster that required you to shoot at it, using a control panel attached to your seats. The final major attraction within the park was also one of the most intriguing. AS1 was a motion simulator ride depicting a futuristic police chase, in a vehicle captained by none other than Michael Jackson, who had previously appeared in other Sega properties such as the Michael Jackson's Moonwalker arcade game. Other experiences in the park included the Nickelodeon TV machine, a children's play area themed to the channel that raised me as a child in the 90s. This section gave children a chance to climb, crawl, slide, and even get slimed, surrounded by your favorite Nickelodeon characters, with a major focus on the Australian wallaby and titular character from Rocko's Modern Life. Another major reason to visit the park was for the extensive arcade game collection featured within, featuring over 100 arcade cabinets with some games never seen before in Australia, all of which were an added cost per play on top of your ticket entry to the park. Being the 1990s, Sega World was also home to a large selection of Sega Saturn consoles to try out, in the hope that you would want to bring the joy of Sega's new console into your home. Inside the building, it was hard to forget who had built this place of fun. Sonic the Hedgehog was everywhere, from marketing to merchandise to meet and greets to cups and so much more. One of the park's strangest uses of Sonic, though, had to be in the Sonic in Sydney stage show, the name of 2 separate shows that inhabited a stage near the food court area within the park, both of which have never been seen again since the closure, apart from a few select images and an audio rip of the CD being posted online. The first version of this show featured full-body costume characters of Sonic, Tails, Sally, and Dr. Robotnik, and featured on Sonic fleeing to Australia to hide the Chaos Emeralds, all whilst Robotnik had captured Sally, was keeping her prisoner in his base positioned on top of the Sydney Harbour Bridge before he proceeds to fall in love with her, asking her why she loves Sonic and not him. Just then, Sonic and Tails burst in to save the day by making Robotnik drink a love potion that is actually a sleeping potion. Yeah, it was weird. The show featured a number of original songs which can all be heard in the show's official soundtrack that you can find a link to in the video description. Even less is known about the second version of the show, which was brought in only a few months after opening, as they felt the show wasn't dynamic enough. The second version was a puppet show with a more tame plot focused on Dr. Robotnik inventing a machine to defeat Sonic, before, unsurprisingly, being defeated himself. Once you were done having a great day at Sega World, you picked up some perfectly 90s merchandise before exiting the park to either enjoy the nearby water playground or grab some dinner at the garishly 90s McDonald's restaurant. Sega World opened to positive press and opinion from parkgoers, but from the beginning struggled to meet the required attendance figures. It was expected at the time that the park would see 800,000 guests a year, but never quite met those numbers, and the park soon began to lose money. But management decided to hold on to attendance hopes in the form of the upcoming 2000 Sydney Olympics. However, at the same time over in Japan, Sega themselves were having financial issues due to the failed launches of the Sega Mega CD and the 32X, and had to sell their stake in Sega World back to Jack Fun, who pocketed around $35 million from the sale to help support the struggling park. The 2000 Olympics came and went and were a huge success for Sydney and Australia. The Games brought large amounts of international and domestic tourist revenue, and while Sega World did share in this success somewhat, it was still not enough to meet the park's break-even point, and changes needed to be made. Shortly after the Olympic Games finished, several of the park's rides, including Mad Bazooka, were sold off to make room for new attractions, including an ice rink. They also announced at the time that the park would be closed 2 days a week during the off-peak periods to facilitate construction, and during opening hours, all of the arcade games would be set to free to play with your admission ticket. The park closed completely in November of 2000 to implement new construction, meant to wrap up in 2001, when new attractions would open and save the park. But unfortunately for the residents of Sydney, when the doors closed in November of 2000, they never were to open again. Sega World Sydney was permanently closed. Jack Fun wasted no time in trying to wash their hands of the failed venture. In March of 2001, an auction was held to attempt to sell off any remaining attractions from the park. Estimates valued the park's assets at around $1 million, but in their rush to sell as quickly as they could, Jack Fun accepted any reasonable offer for attractions, resulting in rides selling for drastically less than expected, with one ride with a reserve of $200,000 only selling for $140,000. Both Rail Chase and Ghost Hunters were sold to Highland in India, where they still operate to this day. After this auction, the Sega World site sat dormant for years, while Jack Fun and the Sydney Harbour Foreshore Authority decided what to do with it, and the still over 90-year lease held on the property. Frustrated at the lack of action and progress, the SHFA paid Jack Fun $10 million in March of 2003 to terminate their 99-year lease, and with that, any hopes of bringing another entertainment precinct to the area were squashed. Over the next few years, the Sega World building was leased by the similarly named SGA or the Shanghai Group Australia, who unceremoniously used the space as a furniture showroom. SGA would remain as the final tenants in the building before its demolition in 2008. And after 3 years of continuous work on the site, it became the new home for the Commonwealth Bank of Australia's head offices, in a new, environmentally sustainable building. In the years since, the Jack Fun name has only been heard again in relation to a lawsuit they brought against the Foreshore Authority for misleading conduct that saw them awarded a sum of $1.25 million. The story of Sega World almost holds parallels to the story of Sega themselves, a new age, forward-thinking idea that proves initially popular, but struggled to keep up, and shriveled to nothing in the fast-changing world around it. Today here in Darling Harbour, no evidence of the park remains, apart from the memories of those who were, like myself, lucky enough to experience a great day out with family or friends at Sega World Sydney. For Review Time, I'm Luke. Thanks for watching, liking, and subscribing.